The stars had always been silent until that day when everything changed forever across the galaxy and beyond into the unknown depths of space, where ancient powers ruled with iron fists and believed themselves to be divine beings far above all other forms of life. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UHS Defender, watching the endless void through the main viewing screen as his ship moved slowly through the outer rim territories on what should have been just another routine survey mission, but fate had other plans waiting in the darkness between the stars. The exploration vessel hummed quietly as it traveled through space, carrying a crew of 200 brave souls who had volunteered to venture into the unknown regions, where no human ship had ever gone before, and map new worlds that might one day become homes for Earth's growing population. Lisa Parker moved across the bridge, checking the sensor readings and making sure all systems were working properly as the ship's first officer and second in command, while the rest of the crew went about their daily duties completely unaware that their lives were about to change in ways they could never have imagined. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 years, conquering world after world and enslaving entire species under their cruel dominion, while calling themselves gods and demanding worship from every living being they encountered in their endless quest for power and control. High Archon Veltar sat upon his golden throne aboard the massive command ship that led a fleet of 12 enormous dreadnoughts through the void like predators, hunting for new prey to devour and add to their growing empire of fear and death. The alien leader's skin was pale blue and covered with strange markings that glowed with an inner light, while his eyes burned with the cold fire of someone who had never known defeat or been challenged by any force in the known universe for countless generations. The Zephyrians had swept across star systems, destroying any civilization that dared to resist their divine authority and reducing proud worlds to smoking ruins filled with the bones of those who had refused to kneel before their supposed godhood. Bridge of Jake's ship suddenly came alive with warning lights and alarm sounds as the sensors detected something massive approaching from the edge of the solar system, moving faster than anything the crew had ever seen before in their years of exploration. Lisa rushed to her station and began analyzing the incoming data while her fingers flew across the control panels, trying to make sense of readings that seemed impossible according to everything they knew about physics and space travel. Captain, we have 12 large objects approaching our position at incredible speed, she called out across the bridge as the crew members looked at each other with growing concern and fear about what might be coming their way. The main screen flickered and then filled with the image of something that made every person on the bridge step back in shock and amazement as they saw ships unlike anything in human history floating in the darkness like monuments to alien power and technology. Each Zephyrian dreadnought was over 5 miles long and shaped like a giant spear with smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to absorb light itself, while energy fields crackled around their hulls like captured lightning waiting to be unleashed. Unknown vessel, you will stop your movement immediately and prepare to receive our divine message, came a voice through the communication system that sounded like thunder rolling across mountains and carried with it the weight of absolute authority. Jake felt his heart racing as he realized they were facing something far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered before, but he forced himself to remain calm and speak with the steady voice of a trained officer. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Human States Exploration Vessel Defender, and we come in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship with any intelligent life we might discover in our travels through space. The response came back filled with what could only be described as cruel amusement mixed with the kind of contempt that gods might feel when looking down at insects crawling in the dirt far below their elevated position. Foolish creatures, you dare to speak as equals to the divine Zephyrian Empire when you are nothing more than primitive animals who have barely learned to leave your pathetic world and venture into the realm of your betters. High Archon Veltar's image appeared on the screen, showing a being that radiated power and authority, while his cold eyes seemed to look right through Jake and the rest of the human crew as if they were less than nothing. I am Veltar, the High Archon of the Zephyrian Empire and ruler of this galaxy by divine right, granted to me by the ancient powers that shaped the universe itself, and you will listen carefully to my words or face complete destruction. The alien leader continued speaking with the absolute confidence of someone who had never been challenged or defeated in thousands of years of conquest and domination across countless star systems. Your species will have exactly 72 of your primitive time units to surrender completely and unconditionally to our divine authority and prepare your entire world for integration into our glorious empire. Jake felt the weight of those words settling over him like a heavy blanket as he realized that not just his ship and crew but all of humanity was now facing a threat unlike anything they had ever imagined in their worst nightmares. If you refuse our generous offer, then every human being in existence will be eliminated from the universe as punishment for your arrogance in thinking you could resist the will of gods who have ruled the stars since before your son was born to demonstrate their power. The Zephyrian ships moved toward a nearby asteroid field and began firing weapons that turned massive chunks of rock into glowing vapor with casual ease that showed just how outmatched humanity would be in any direct confrontation. Lisa watched the display of alien technology with growing horror as she realized that each blast from their weapons carried more destructive power than Earth's entire nuclear arsenal combined into a single, devastating attack. The demonstration lasted only a few minutes, but it was enough to show that the Zephyrians could destroy planets as easily as humans might swat flies, and that resistance would seem completely hopeless. Against such overwhelming force, you have been warned, and the message has been sent to your homeworld so that your leaders may consider our generous terms, Veltar said with the tone of someone granting a great favor to unworthy recipients. Jake knew that he had to respond somehow, but what could he possibly say to beings who claimed to be gods and had the power to back up their threats with weapons beyond human understanding? We will deliver your message to our government, but I cannot speak for all of humanity regarding such an important decision that will affect billions of lives. The High Archon's laughter filled the bridge like the sound of breaking glass, mixed with the roar of distant thunder as he found the human captain's response amusing in its naive honesty. You have 72 hours to decide whether your species will kneel before us willingly or be forced to their knees through methods that will make their final moments filled with unimaginable pain and suffering. The communication ended abruptly, leaving Jake and his crew staring at empty space where the alien fleet had been just moments before as they tried to process what had just happened to their quiet exploration mission. Lisa began immediately transmitting everything they had recorded back to Earth, knowing that humanity's leaders would need every piece of information about this new threat that had emerged from the darkness between the stars. As the UHS Defender turned toward home, Jake Morrison wondered if he had just witnessed the beginning of humanity's final chapter, or if somehow his species would find a way to face these self-proclaimed gods and prove that even divine authority could be challenged by those who refused to kneel. The emergency alert system screamed across Earth as President William Hayes rushed through the corridors of the White House toward the Situation Room, where the most important meeting in human history was about to begin and determine the fate of every person alive on the planet. Admiral Susan Blake had already assembled the Joint Chiefs of Staff around the massive conference table covered with screens, showing data from the UHS Defender's encounter with the alien fleet that called themselves gods and demanded humanity's complete surrender within 72 hours. "Show me everything we have," President Hayes said as he took his seat at the head of the table, while his advisors pulled up holographic displays of the Zephyrian ships and their devastating demonstration of power against the asteroid field. The recordings from Captain Morrison's ship played on the main screen, showing the 12 enormous dreadnoughts that moved through space like floating cities armed with weapons that could vaporize entire mountains in seconds without any visible effort or strained ER. Marcus Turner stepped forward from his position near the back of the room, where he had been quietly studying the alien technology readings and preparing to present what might be humanity's only hope for survival against these self-proclaimed divine beings. Their energy signatures are unlike anything we have ever encountered before, he began while pointing to the data streams flowing across multiple monitors around the room, filled with numbers that seemed impossible according to known physics. Admiral Blake leaned forward in her chair as she studied the tactical information about the alien fleet and tried to calculate what kind of losses humanity would face in a direct military confrontation against such overwhelming technological superiority. Our entire combined fleet would be destroyed in minutes against even one of those ships, she said with the grim honesty of a career military officer who had seen enough combat to understand when a battle could not be won through conventional means. President Hayes felt the weight of 6 billion lives pressing down on his shoulders as he looked around the table at the faces of men and women who had devoted their careers to protecting humanity but now faced an enemy beyond their worst nightmares. What options do we have besides surrender? He asked, knowing that capitulation to these aliens would mean the end of human freedom and probably the destruction of everything their species had built over thousands of years of civilization and progress. Dr. Turner moved to the front of the room and activated a new set of displays, showing technical diagrams and energy readings that had been classified at the highest levels of government security until this moment, when secrecy no longer mattered. For the past 15 years we have been working on a project that was considered theoretical until today, he explained while the screens showed images of a massive construction facility hidden on the dark side of the moon where something incredible had been taking shape. The prototype Warship appeared on the display as a sleek vessel unlike any human ship ever built, with revolutionary fusion drives and experimental weapon systems that pushed the boundaries of what Earth scientists thought was possible. Admiral Blake studied the specifications with growing interest as she realized that this secret project might actually give humanity a fighting chance against the alien invaders who believed themselves to be untouchable gods ruling the galaxy. The UHS Thunderstrike incorporates technology we developed by thinking completely outside traditional engineering principles, Dr. Turner continued as more details appeared showing how the ship's systems worked in ways that even he barely understood. President Hayes looked at the images of humanity's secret weapon and felt a spark of hope beginning to grow in his chest despite the overwhelming odds they faced against an empire that had conquered the galaxy for 10,000 years. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, High Archon Veltar sat upon his throne aboard the command ship of the Zephyrian fleet as reports came in from across the galaxy about the discovery of this new species that dared to exist without permission. The alien leader's advisors gathered around him like shadows in the dim lighting of the bridge, while they discussed what punishment would be most appropriate for these humans who had shown such disrespect to divine authority. Perhaps we should make an example of them that will be remembered across all worlds for generations to come, suggested one of the council members whose pale blue skin glowed with the same inner light that marked all members of their superior race. Voltar considered this proposal while watching the recordings of his encounter with the primitive human ship and feeling nothing but contempt for beings who thought they could negotiate with gods as if they were equals. Send word to all conquered worlds that they will witness the destruction of an entire species that refused to kneel before our divine rule, he commanded while his fingers traced patterns of light across the armrest of his throne. The High Archon could not comprehend why these humans would choose death over the honor of serving beings as magnificent and powerful as the Zephyrian Empire that had brought order to chaos throughout the known universe. Back on Earth, the emergency session continued as military leaders tried to understand how they could possibly coordinate a defense against 12 massive alien warships with technology that seemed like magic compared to human engineering. Captain Amy Rodriguez received sealed orders to report immediately to the lunar construction facility where she would take command of the prototype vessel that represented humanity's desperate gamble against impossible odds. She had been chosen for this mission because of her exceptional record as both a pilot and tactical commander, but nothing in her training had prepared her for the responsibility of carrying her entire species' hopes into battle. The secret base on the moon's dark side buzzed with activity as technicians made final preparations to launch the most advanced warship humanity had ever created, while knowing it might also be their last day. Karen Wells monitored the energy readings from her position in Earth's command center as she made calculations that would determine whether the experimental systems could actually work under combat conditions against alien weapons. News of the alien ultimatum spread across Earth despite government attempts to control information, and billions of people looked up at the stars wondering if they would live to see another sunrise or if their world would become another conquest. Children asked their parents why the sky seemed different, while adults gathered in groups to discuss what surrender might mean for the future of human civilization and whether resistance was worth the risk of total annihilation. Religious leaders held services in every language and faith as people sought comfort in ancient beliefs, while scientists worked frantically to find some weakness in the alien technology that might give humanity an advantage. The 72-hour deadline ticked away like a countdown to the end of everything humans had ever known or accomplished in their brief existence on a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system. President Hayes made the decision that would define his legacy and possibly end human history as he looked directly into the camera that would broadcast his message to High Archon Veltar and the waiting Zephyrian fleet. We have received your demands and considered them carefully. He began with a steady voice that carried the determination of an entire species that had never learned how to quit when faced with impossible challenges. Humanity rejects your ultimatum, and we will not surrender our freedom to beings who call themselves gods but act like tyrants seeking to enslave every living thing they encounter in their path of destruction. The message was transmitted into space, where it would reach the alien fleet and inform them that Earth intended to fight regardless of the cost because some things were more important than survival itself. High Archon Veltar received the human response with amusement mixed with genuine surprise that such primitive creatures would dare to defy the divine will of beings who had ruled the galaxy since before their sun existed. Prepare the fleet for departure, he commanded while standing from his throne, with the graceful movements of someone who had never known defeat or even serious resistance from any enemy they had faced. The 12 Zephyrian dreadnoughts began their journey toward Earth's solar system like harbingers of doom, moving through the void with the inevitability of death itself coming to claim another victim. The Zephyrian fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system like 12 dark angels of destruction, bringing divine judgment to a species that had dared to refuse the will of gods who ruled the galaxy with absolute power. High Archon Veltar stood on his command bridge, watching the small blue world that hung in the void ahead of them, while his advisors reported that human ships were actually moving to intercept their fleet instead of fleeing in terror. As expected, impossible, the alien leader whispered as his pale blue features twisted with confusion and growing anger at the sight of 7 primitive vessels approaching his massive dreadnoughts as if they actually intended to fight beings of divine heritage. Captain Jake Morrison piloted his ship USS Defender alongside 6 other human vessels in what everyone knew would be a suicide mission designed to buy precious time for Earth's real plan to unfold somewhere else in the solar system. The small human fleet looked like insects buzzing around giants as they moved toward the Zephyrian armada that could have destroyed entire star systems with casual ease, but chose to hold back and observe these strange creatures. All ships maintain formation and remember that we are not here to win this battle, Jake announced over the communication channel to his fellow captains who had volunteered for what might be humanity's final act of defiance. Admiral Susan Blake watched from Earth's command center as the tactical display showed her brave crews moving into position while she coordinated the evacuation of civilian populations from major cities that would become primary targets. The Zephyrian ships hung motionless in space like floating monuments to alien superiority, while their crews observed the approaching human vessels with the kind of detached interest that cats might show when watching mice run across an open field. High Archon Veltar could not understand why these primitive beings continued to resist when they had been shown the overwhelming power that would be used against them if they refused to surrender and accept their proper place as slaves. Perhaps they are too stupid to understand the futility of their situation, suggested one of his advisors while studying the tactical readouts that showed how easily the human ships could be destroyed whenever the High Archon chose to end this amusing display. The alien leader decided to make an example that would finally break whatever remained of human resistance by demonstrating that even their bravest warriors were nothing more than insects before the might of divine beings. Target their moon colonies first, Veltar commanded with the casual tone of someone ordering the destruction of something completely insignificant, while his weapons officers prepared to unleash devastating plasma cannons. The lunar settlements housed millions of people who had built new lives among the craters and valleys of Earth's ancient companion, but they would serve as the perfect demonstration of what happened to those who defied. God's Captain Jake Morrison saw the alien weapons beginning to charge and knew that innocent civilians were about to die because humanity had refused to kneel before these self-proclaimed divine beings who ruled through fear and violence. All ships attack now, he ordered, while his 7-vessel formation accelerated toward the massive Zephyrian dreadnoughts in a desperate attempt to draw their attention away from the defenseless moon colony's human missiles and energy. Beams struck the alien shields with about as much effect as raindrops hitting a mountain, while the Zephyrian crews looked on with amusement at such pathetic weapons fired by primitive creatures. The first lunar colony vanished in a brilliant flash of plasma fire that could be seen from Earth's surface as millions of people died in an instant to satisfy the wounded pride of beings who believed themselves to be gods. Jake felt tears streaming down his face as he watched the destruction of innocent lives, while his own ship shook under the impact of alien weapons that toyed with the human fleet instead of destroying it. Immediately High Archon Veltar wanted to prolong this demonstration of divine power so that the humans would fully understand their helplessness before he granted them the mercy of a quick death instead of prolonged suffering. Disable their ships, but do not destroy them yet, he commanded, while his weapons officers adjusted their targeting systems to wound rather than kill these annoying insects that refused to acknowledge superior beings. The Defender lost main power as alien energy beams overloaded its systems and left Jake's crew floating helplessly in space while they watched 2 more lunar colonies disappear in bursts of deadly plasma. Dr. Karen Wells monitored the battle from Earth's command center, where she made final calculations for the secret weapon while trying to ignore the reports of massive civilian casualties on humanity's moon. The Zephyrian fleet began broadcasting their victory across subspace frequencies so that every conquered species in the galaxy would witness how the divine empire dealt with those who showed disrespect to their rightful rulers. Let all beings see what happens to those who forget their place in the natural order where gods rule over lesser creatures, Veltar announced while his ships moved closer to Earth itself for the final act of destruction. But something was happening on the far side of the solar system near Jupiter, where massive energy readings were building to levels that even the advanced Zephyrian sensors had difficulty measuring or understanding. Captain Amy Rodriguez sat in the command chair of the UHS Thunderstrike as her revolutionary warship powered up systems that represented humanity's greatest scientific achievement and possibly their last hope for survival. The prototype vessel had been hidden behind Jupiter's massive bulk while final preparations were made, and now it began to move toward the inner system with fusion drives that created an aurora of deadly energy. Dr. Marcus Turner's theories were about to be tested under combat conditions as the experimental ship's power core reached critical levels and began channeling forces that human scientists barely comprehended. The Thunderstrike was built using principles that the Zephyrians had never conceived because their ancient empire relied on technology that had remained unchanged for thousands of years. While humanity constantly innovated, Amy felt the awesome power of her ship flowing around her like liquid fire as systems came online that could absorb enemy weapons and convert their energy into fuel for humanity's own devastating counterattack. High Archon Veltar noticed the energy signature approaching from Jupiter's direction but dismissed it as probably some natural phenomenon, since no single ship could possibly threaten his entire fleet of divine dreadnoughts prepared to destroy their homeworld. He commanded while his weapons officers targeted Earth itself for a demonstration that would end human resistance forever and add Another dead world to the Empire's long list of conquests. The Zephyrian plasma cannons began charging for the attack that would boil Earth's oceans and crack its continents while turning the cradle of humanity into a lifeless rock floating in space. Jake Morrison and his surviving crew watched in horror from their disabled ship as the alien weapons prepared to end 6 billion lives in a single devastating attack that would erase human civilization. But the energy readings from Jupiter continued to grow stronger and more focused as something emerged from behind the gas giant that made even the massive Zephyrian dreadnoughts look small by comparison. The UHS Thunderstrike burst into view like a new star being born as its experimental fusion drives created a brilliant display of power that illuminated the entire solar system with auroras of contained destruction. Captain Amy Rodriguez opened a communication channel to the alien fleet as her ship accelerated toward them with weapons that represented everything humanity had learned about turning theory into reality. This is Captain Amy Rodriguez of the United Human States, and you have made a terrible mistake in assuming that we would kneel before anyone who calls themselves gods, High Archon. Veltar stared at the approaching human vessel with growing confusion and the first hint of uncertainty he had felt in thousands of years of easy conquests across helpless worlds. The single human ship radiated more raw power than some entire star systems, while its hull design incorporated principles that seemed to bend the very laws of physics around its sleek form. "Destroy that vessel immediately," Veltar ordered, but his voice carried a note of concern as he realized that something was very wrong with what should have been an easy victory over primitive creatures. The 12 Zephyrian dreadnoughts turned their weapons toward the approaching Thunderstrike, while their crews prepared to unleash the full might of divine technology against this unexpected challenge to their authority. Amy Rodriguez smiled as she felt her ship's revolutionary systems responding to her commands, while defensive screens came online that would soon show the self-proclaimed gods what real power looked like. The UHS Thunderstrike moved through space like a force of nature itself as Captain Amy Rodriguez guided her revolutionary warship toward the Zephyrian fleet that hung in formation near Earth like 12 dark monuments to alien arrogance and supposed divine authority. High Archon. Veltar watched the approaching human vessel with growing unease as his sensors reported energy readings that seemed impossible according to everything his ancient empire knew about the fundamental laws of physics. And engineering, the experimental fusion drives of the Thunderstrike created cascading waves of brilliant energy that rippled outward from the ship's hull in patterns that looked like captured starlight dancing around the sleek form of humanity's greatest achievement. Dr. Marcus Turner's revolutionary theories had become reality in the form of a warship that didn't just use energy but transformed it in ways that the Zephyrian Empire had never imagined possible during their 10,000 years of galactic conquest. Commander Ben Carter coordinated the ship's weapon systems from his station while watching displays that showed power levels climbing toward maximum capacity as the Thunderstrike prepared to demonstrate what human innovation could accomplish. The alien dreadnoughts began firing their massive plasma cannons in coordinated volleys that had destroyed countless worlds and civilizations throughout the galaxy. But today they would face something completely different from any enemy they had encountered. Amy Rodriguez activated her ship's experimental defensive systems as the first wave of enemy fire reached the Thunderstrike and struck shields that had been designed using principles that challenged everything scientists thought they knew about energy manipulation. Instead of trying to block the incoming plasma bolts, the human ship's revolutionary armor absorbed them completely and channeled their destructive force into the vessel's own power systems, where it became fuel for retaliation. High Archon Veltar felt his confidence wavering for the first time in millennia as he watched his divine weapons being consumed by this single human vessel that seemed to grow stronger with every attack his fleet launched. "Impossible," he whispered, while his pale blue features twisted with confusion and growing fear as the tactical displays showed that their most powerful weapons were actually feeding energy to their enemy instead of destroying it. The Zephyrian weapons officers increased their firing rate and concentrated all 12 dreadnoughts on the lone human ship that continued to advance toward them while absorbing everything they could throw at its impossible defenses. Captain Amy Rodriguez felt the power of absorbed enemy fire flowing through her ship's systems like liquid lightning as the thunderstrike converted alien plasma into raw energy that could be redirected through humanity's own devastating weapons. All systems are operating beyond theoretical maximums. Commander Carter reported with excitement in his voice as he watched displays that showed their experimental technology working exactly as Dr. Turner had predicted it would. The human warship's adaptive armor automatically analyzed each incoming weapon type and adjusted its molecular structure to provide optimal absorption while learning from every attack that struck its revolutionary. Hull. Carter began targeting the enemy vessels with weapons that represented everything humanity had discovered about turning defensive absorption into offensive devastation, while maintaining perfect coordination with his captain, Fire Amy. Commanded as the Thunderstrike unleashed its first attack against beings who had called themselves gods for so long that they had forgotten what it felt like to face a real challenge to their authority. The kinetic bombardment arrays fired projectiles at near light speed, while the ship's experimental energy cannons released concentrated beams of pure destruction that had been created from the enemy's own absorbed plasma. The first Zephyrian dreadnought shuddered under impacts that penetrated its supposedly invincible shields and tore through armor that had protected divine vessels for thousands of years without ever being seriously damaged. High Archon Veltar watched in horror as sections of his lead ship exploded in brilliant flashes, while emergency alarms sounded throughout the bridge where his crew struggled to understand how primitive creatures could possess such devastating power. How is this possible? He demanded while his advisors frantically analyzed the human weapon signatures and found technology that seemed to operate outside the known laws that governed the universe itself. The Thunderstrike continued its relentless advance while firing continuously at targets that had never experienced defeat or even serious resistance during their long reign of terror across the galaxy. Amy Rodriguez guided her ship through the alien formation with the skill of someone who had trained for this moment her entire life, while watching enemy vessels that had seemed invincible. Just minutes earlier, the second Zephyrian dreadnought lost main power as human kinetic rounds punched through its hull and destroyed critical systems that kept the massive vessel operational while its crew abandoned their stations in panic. Commander Carter coordinated multiple weapon systems simultaneously as the Thunderstrike proved that human engineering could overcome alien technology through innovation and adaptation rather than brute force. Alone, their shields are collapsing, he reported, while targeting another enemy ship that was trying desperately to retreat from this unexpected demonstration of human superiority in both tactics and technology. The third alien vessel exploded in a cascade of energy that lit up the solar system like a miniature sun, while debris scattered across space in patterns that told the story of divine pride meeting human determination. High Archon Veltar felt his worldview crumbling as he realized that his supposedly superior race had become complacent. During their long centuries of easy victories against species that lacked the courage to fight back, the Zephyrian Empire had relied on ancient technology that never changed or evolved, while these humans had created something entirely new that turned the aliens' greatest strengths into weaknesses. All ships retreat immediately, Veltar ordered, but his voice carried none of the divine authority that had once commanded absolute obedience from every living being in the known galaxy. The remaining Zephyrian dreadnoughts tried to withdraw from the battle, but found themselves facing a human warship that moved faster than anything they had ever encountered while continuing to absorb their defensive fire. Amy Rodriguez pressed her attack with ruthless efficiency as the Thunderstrike demonstrated that mercy was a luxury that could not be afforded when fighting beings who had shown no compassion for their countless victims. The fourth alien ship died in flames as human weapons tore it apart while its crew transmitted desperate pleas for assistance that would never come because the rest of the fleet was fighting for survival. Commander Carter watched his tactical displays with satisfaction as enemy after enemy fell before The overwhelming superiority of human innovation combined with the desperate courage of a species fighting for its very existence, 5 enemy vessels destroyed. He reported while the Thunderstrike continued hunting the remaining aliens who had discovered that calling themselves gods did not make them invincible against determined opposition High Archon. Veltar abandoned his throne and rushed to the navigation station where he personally ordered his ship to flee from this nightmare battle that had shattered everything he believed about divine superiority. The 6th Zephyrian dreadnought vanished in a brilliant explosion that sent shockwaves through the remaining alien fleet as crews, who had never known defeat, found themselves facing complete annihilation. Captain Amy Rodriguez felt no satisfaction in the destruction she was causing because she knew that every alien death was justice for the millions of humans who had died in the lunar colonies. The 7th enemy ship lost power and began drifting helplessly through space while its crew sent surrender signals that the Thunderstrike ignored because this battle was about more than victory. Ben Carter targeted the 8th alien vessel with weapons that had been charged by absorbing the enemy's own plasma fire in a perfect demonstration of how human adaptability could turn any situation to their advantage. The Zephyrian command ship, where High Archon Veltar cowered in terror, was the only vessel still capable of effective resistance, but even its mighty weapons could not penetrate the revolutionary defenses of humanity's greatest achievement. This cannot be happening, Veltar whispered as he watched his divine fleet being systematically destroyed by a single human ship that seemed to grow more powerful with every passing moment of the battle. The 9th alien dreadnought exploded like a dying star while the 10th and 11th vessels tried desperately to escape the relentless human attack that had turned their easy conquest into a complete disaster. Amy Rodriguez guided the Thunderstrike toward the enemy command ship where the alien leader, who had demanded humanity's surrender, now faced the consequences of underestimating a species that refused to kneel before anyone. High Archon Veltar stood frozen in absolute terror as he watched the final moments of his once mighty fleet being systematically destroyed by a single human warship that had turned his divine weapons into instruments of his own destruction. The UHS Thunderstrike moved through the wreckage of 11 Zephyrian dreadnoughts like an avenging angel, while Captain Amy Rodriguez guided her revolutionary vessel toward the alien command ship that contained the being who had demanded humanity's surrender, all weapons charged and ready for final engagement. Commander Ben Carter reported from his station while watching displays that showed the enemy flagship trying desperately to escape from the nightmare that had consumed their entire fleet. The Zephyrian command vessel fired everything it had at the approaching human ship, but the experimental armor of the Thunderstrike absorbed each plasma bolt and converted the destructive energy into fuel for its own devastating weapon systems. Amy Rodriguez felt the absorbed alien fire flowing through her ship's revolutionary power grid like captured lightning that would soon be returned to its senders with interest added by human engineering and determination. High Archon Veltar could not understand how his supposedly primitive enemies had created technology that seemed to violate every law of physics he had learned during thousands of years of galactic conquest and domination. Impossible, he whispered while his pale blue features twisted with panic as he realized that everything his empire had believed about their divine superiority was crumbling around him like ancient monuments in an earthquake. The human warship continued its relentless approach while deflecting every attack the aliens could mount and growing stronger with each weapon that struck its adaptive hull designed by scientists who refused to accept limitations. Commander Carter coordinated the final attack as the Thunderstrike's kinetic bombardment systems prepared to deliver justice for the millions of innocent humans who had died in the lunar colonies just hours earlier. Target their engines and weapons, but leave life support intact, Amy ordered because she understood that mercy and victory would demonstrate humanity's true strength better than complete destruction ever could. Alien command ship shuddered under impacts that disabled its main drives and left it drifting helplessly through space while emergency systems struggled to maintain basic life support for the terrified crew. High Archon Veltar fell to his knees on the bridge of his crippled vessel as the reality of total defeat crashed over him like a tidal wave that swept away 10,000 years of unquestioned divine authority. How can this be happening to gods? He cried out while his advisors cowered in terror at the sight of their supreme leader reduced to a broken creature begging for mercy from beings they had considered inferior. The Thunderstrike positioned itself alongside the disabled alien flagship, while Amy Rodriguez opened communication channels to the enemy vessel that now contained prisoners rather than conquerors. Hi Archon Valtar, this is Captain Amy Rodriguez, and I am offering you the choice that you never gave to any of your victims during your reign of terror across the galaxy. The alien leader's image appeared on the human ship's main screen, showing a being whose arrogance had been replaced by fear and confusion. As he struggled to comprehend his complete defeat, you can surrender unconditionally and face judgment for your crimes. Or you can choose to die fighting like the warrior you pretend to be, Amy continued while her weapons remained trained on vital systems of the enemy ship. Voltar stared at the human captain with eyes that had lost their cold fire and now reflected only the hollow emptiness of someone whose entire worldview had been shattered beyond repair. We are gods, he whispered weakly, as if saying the words might somehow make them true again, despite all evidence to the contrary that surrounded him in the form of his destroyed fleet commander. Carter monitored the alien ship systems while making sure their weapons remained functional enough to pose a threat if the enemy chose to continue fighting rather than accept the mercy being offered. You were never gods, Amy replied with the quiet authority of someone who had proven her point through superior technology and tactical skill rather than empty boasts about divine heritage. The human captain understood that true power came from the ability to protect others and build something better rather than the capacity to destroy and dominate through fear and violence. High Archon Veltar looked around his ruined bridge at the faces of crew members who had believed in his divine authority, but now saw him as just another failed leader who had led them to disaster. What do you want from us? He asked while his voice carried none of the thunder that had once commanded absolute obedience from entire star systems full of conquered peoples. Amy Rodriguez considered her response carefully because she knew that this moment would determine not just the fate of the remaining aliens but the future relationship between humanity and the galaxy. I want you to understand that real strength comes from protecting the innocent and building civilizations rather than destroying them in service to your own pride and arrogance. The Thunderstrike's sensors detected movement throughout the solar system as human rescue ships began searching the debris fields for any survivors from the lunar colonies that had been destroyed in the alien demonstration. Commander Carter received reports from Earth Command about the massive effort to help the families of those who had died while humanity celebrated the victory that had saved their world from conquest. High Archon Valtar slowly rose to his feet and walked to the communication station where he would make the most difficult decision of his long life as the supreme ruler of a fallen empire. The Zephyrian fleet surrenders unconditionally to human authority, he announced while his words were broadcast across subspace frequencies to every world that had once trembled before his divine power. The alien leader's admission of defeat sent shockwaves through the galaxy as countless enslaved species learned that their supposedly invincible masters had been humbled by a race that most had never heard of before. Amy Rodriguez felt the weight of victory settling over her shoulders as she realized that humanity had just become a major power in galactic politics. Whether they wanted that responsibility or not, prepare boarding parties to secure the enemy vessel, she ordered, while making sure that her crew treated the defeated aliens with the dignity that had been denied to so many of their victims. Human boarding teams found a ship full of broken beings who could barely comprehend what had happened to their fleet and their divine authority during the course of a single devastating battle. High Archon Veltar was placed in restraints that were surprisingly gentle considering the massive destruction his empire had caused throughout the galaxy during its long reign of terror and conquest. Why do you show us mercy when we would have shown none to you? He asked Amy Rodriguez during the formal surrender ceremony that marked the end of Zephyrian dominance in this region of space. The human captain looked at the fallen alien leader with something that might have been pity as she considered How pride and arrogance had led an entire civilization down the path to destruction. Because mercy is what separates civilization from barbarism, and we choose to be better than you were, even when we have every right to seek revenge for your crimes. Commander Carter began coordinating with Earth Command about the massive task of dealing with captured alien technology and the political implications of humanity's sudden emergence as a galactic power. The Thunderstrike began its journey back toward Earth while towing the disabled Zephyrian command ship that contained prisoners who would face judgment for thousands of years of oppression and genocide. Amy Rodriguez stood on her bridge, looking out at the stars that no longer seemed as cold and distant as they had before. Humanity proved that even gods could fall when faced with courage and innovation. The galaxy waited to see what this new human power would do with their victory, and whether they would choose the path of conquest or something entirely different from what had come before. 6 months after the defeat of the Zephyrian fleet, humanity found itself thrust into a position of galactic leadership that no one had expected or planned for, as news of their victory spread to every corner of the known UNIVRSEDR. Lisa Thompson led the first diplomatic mission to the Zephyrian homeworld, where millions of aliens struggled to understand how their divine empire had been destroyed by a species they had never heard of before that fateful day. The former subjects of the Zephyrian Empire sent messages of gratitude and hope to Earth as world after world declared their independence from the tyranny that had oppressed them for thousands of years. Captain Jake Morrison stood in his new office aboard the orbital station that served as humanity's first interstellar embassy, while he coordinated meetings with representatives from dozens of liberated civilizations. The Zephyrian homeworld had become a place of confusion and despair as the alien population tried to rebuild their society without the rigid hierarchy that had defined their existence for countless generations. High Archon Veltar sat in a comfortable but secure facility on Earth, where human scientists studied his people's technology while he underwent what could only be described as therapy for a shattered worldview. We believed we were chosen by the universe itself to rule over lesser beings, he explained to Dr. Thompson during one of their regular sessions, where she tried to help him understand the difference between strength and tyranny. The former alien leader had aged visibly during his months of captivity, as the reality of his empire's crimes weighed heavily on someone who had never before considered the suffering of his victims. Lisa Thompson found herself in the unique position of trying to rehabilitate beings who had committed genocide across the galaxy, while also helping them find a new purpose that didn't involve conquest and domination. Your people have the capacity for growth and change just like any other species, she told Veltar while showing him reports about Zephyrian colonies that were learning to cooperate with their former slaves. Meanwhile, Captain Amy Rodriguez had been promoted to admiral and given command of humanity's growing space fleet as Earth prepared to take on responsibilities they never wanted but could not avoid. The prototype technology from the UHS Thunderstrike was being studied and refined by teams of scientists who worked to understand how they had achieved such devastating effectiveness against supposedly superior alien weapons. Dr. Marcus Turner found himself leading a new research division dedicated to peaceful applications of the energy absorption technology that had saved humanity from conquest and possible extinction. We must ensure that our weapons serve to protect rather than conquer, he told his team while they developed defensive systems that could be shared with other species. Facing threats from aggressive civilizations, the galaxy slowly began to reorganize itself as former Zephyrian territories established new governments based on cooperation rather than fear, while looking to humanity for guidance and support. Captain Morrison received daily reports about first contact situations, as dozens of species emerged from hiding to join what was becoming known as the Galactic Cooperation Council. Every day brings new challenges but also new opportunities to build something better than what came before, he wrote in his personal log while preparing for another diplomatic meeting. The Zephyrian homeworld experienced its first free elections in recorded history, as the alien population chose leaders based on merit rather than claims of divine authority or inherited power. Veltar watched these developments from Earth with a mixture of sadness and Hope as he realized that his people were capable of becoming something better than the tyrants they had been for millennia. Perhaps losing our empire was the best thing that could have happened to us, he admitted to Dr. Thompson during a session where they discussed the possibility of his eventual return home. Lisa Thompson had developed genuine compassion for the former High Archon as she watched him struggle to understand concepts like democracy and individual rights that had never existed in his society. The human diplomatic corps worked tirelessly to establish trade agreements and mutual defense pacts with species that were learning to trust each other for the first time in thousands of years. Admiral Rodriguez launched the second generation of human warships that incorporated lessons learned from the battle against the Zephyrian fleet while maintaining the defensive philosophy that had brought victory. We build these ships not to conquer, but to protect those who cannot protect themselves, she announced during the commissioning ceremony for the USS Guardian and 5 sister ships. The new vessels represented humanity's commitment to using their technological advantages for peacekeeping, rather than empire building, while maintaining the ability to defend against future threats. Dr. Turner's research teams made breakthrough after breakthrough as they learned to apply energy absorption technology to everything from planetary defense grids to medical equipment that could heal previously incurable diseases. Science should serve life rather than death became the motto of human research institutions as they shared their discoveries freely with any species that requested assistance. The Galactic Cooperation Council established its headquarters on a neutral world that had been liberated from Zephyrian rule, where representatives from hundreds of species worked together to build a better future. Captain Morrison was elected as the first human representative to the council, where he advocated for policies based on mutual respect and voluntary cooperation rather than forced compliance. The former Zephyrian territories experienced unprecedented prosperity as resources that had once been devoted to military conquest were redirected toward education, science, and improving the lives of ordinary citizens. Velter eventually returned to his homeworld, where he served as an advisor to the new democratic government that was learning to function without divine emperors or rigid class systems. The humans taught us that true strength comes from lifting others up rather than keeping them down, he told crowds of young Zephyrians who had never known life under the old empire. Dr. Thompson established exchange programs that allowed former enemies to learn from each other while building the personal relationships that would prevent future conflicts between their species. The galaxy entered a new age of exploration and discovery. As species that had once hidden from Zephyrian patrols emerged to share their knowledge and cultures with the growing galactic community. Admiral Rodriguez led joint military exercises that brought together ships from dozens of worlds to practice defending against threats while learning to work as a unified force. Unity through diversity became the unofficial motto of the new galactic civilization, as species with vastly different biologies and cultures found common ground in their shared commitment to peace. Human technology continued to evolve as engineers incorporated innovations from their new alien partners while maintaining the adaptive philosophy that had brought victory against impossible odds. The Thunderstrike was retired to a place of honor at the Galactic Museum, where children from 100 worlds could learn about the day when one ship changed the course of history. Captain Morrison often visited the memorial to those who died in the lunar colonies, where he reminded himself that freedom always came at a price that should never be forgotten. They believed they were gods until humanity's warship crushed their pride. Read the inscription on the monument, but from that defeat came something greater than any empire. The galaxy looked toward a future where cooperation had replaced conquest, and where the descendants of former enemies worked together to explore the infinite mysteries that awaited them among the stars. Humanity had proven that even the mightiest tyrants could fall when faced with courage, innovation, and the unshakable belief that all beings deserved freedom regardless of their species or origin. The age of false gods had ended, and the age of true cooperation had begun as the galaxy learned that real strength came not from the power to destroy, but from the wisdom to build something better.